Hey, my name is Amoga, co-founder and CEO of Carbon Origins. We're a robotics and VR company on a mission to make robots commonplace. So we're a group of scientists, engineers, and entrepreneurs. We have landed robots on Mars, we've launched suborbital rockets, we've deployed satellite constellations, developed VR technologies for Disney. We're very passionate about deep tech, and we see robotics as the future of front-end labor. And our goal is to incubate that in a location, in a place where it can get the most TLC. We originally started the company in California, but we moved to Minnesota a few months ago. Really affordable to build robots in the United States here in Minnesota. There are a lot of contract manufacturers here with the right expertise. There are other companies building robots here. It is going to be the hotbed for robot manufacturing. The reason is, if you can build Skippies, our robots, to work in the Minnesota weather and geography, they can work anywhere.
Now, when you hire someone with a disability, you've immediately led by example. You've said you trust a new perspective, that you're confident in that person, in yourself, and your team. Now, I work with a theater company, and we have signs on the wall that say, "Work your quirk," and radical inclusion. They emphasize that what makes us different gives us strength, a new perspective, a creative edge. In Cajun cooking, there's an ingredient called the lagniappe, and it's that little something something that keeps you coming back. Hire somebody with a disability. It's the lagniappe thing to do.
So, you've decided to start your own business. You have the resources to sell or the services your new customers need. So what's next? Here's a simple checklist to help you get started. First, choose your business structure. Do you want a sole proprietorship, partnership, limited liability company, or corporation? Each form has tax and financial consequences. Next, check to make sure the name you want to use for your business is available. You can do this by checking with the Minnesota Secretary of State office. If you want to be a sole proprietor, all you have to do is register the business name with the Secretary of State office. Or if your business is going to be an LLC or a corporation, when you file the business structure registration with the Secretary of State's office, that registration also includes the business name. After that, you may need to obtain federal and state tax identification numbers from the Internal Revenue Service and the Minnesota Department of Revenue. Note that some businesses won't need to take this step. Need is determined by the number of business owners, if the business will have employees, and if the business makes taxable sales or provides taxable services. Next, obtain any necessary licenses and permits from state and local government. Then you will need to buy or rent space for the business and set up phone and internet service. You'll also want to start a banking and credit relationship with a bank or other financial institution. And don't forget to write a business plan with benchmarks to guide you through business growth. We can help you.
And remember, if you need help in any of these steps, please reach out to us here at the Small Business Assistance Office. We have staff available to answer your questions.
My name is John Hauk. I am president of LightRun Incorporated. LightRun manufactures and sells a specialized unweighting tool for survivors of stroke, traumatic brain injury, and other injuries. I started out my career working for a company called Cardiac Pacemakers, then later on St. Jude Medical, along with a couple of startups in between. So I came out of the cardiac world, and Minnesota has been a great place for a medical device career. Our product has been sold and is currently being used in Hennepin County Medical Center, the VA Hospital in Minneapolis, North Memorial Hospital, and we're soon going to be delivering a system to Courage Kenny. So we are getting local traction in spite of the pandemic, and our goal is to go nationwide in 2022 and beyond.
Well, I met Andrew in 2010. He was a recent graduate from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. So he already had his education before he came to us. And he was looking for work as an architect.
And I applied for over 200 jobs all over the U.S. I applied for jobs in Hawaii, New York, Florida, and didn't get any sort of response. And after I'd applied for all of those different jobs, I realized that the job market right now is really low and that I was facing discrimination, as were a lot of people with disabilities.
So he's deaf and the world is hearing, and so of course the biggest barrier for him was communication. He worked with MCIL on job interviewing skills, and he did a very nice job talking about his experience and his work qualifications, but he did struggle a little bit with the accommodation issue, and so we worked a little bit more on that.
It was my good fortune to meet Andrew back in 2007, 2008. Andrew was someone who was deaf and he had graduated from architectural school. Really my charge was, how can I help Andrew network, take smaller steps given what the economy was.
He really advocated in my job search. He wants people to get out there. He connected me with people in the field because that's what I needed. He reached out to MnDOT, the Minnesota Department of Transportation, in the Affirmative Action Office. He contacted Lynette Geschwind. She was the head of the Affirmative Action Office at MnDOT. And she was able to set up a contract job for me to inspect airport terminals. It was a fascinating job, but again, it was contract work. And they actually didn't seem to see me as a person with disabilities. Based on my resume, they said via email that they were just really impressed with my experience, and they wanted to give me a chance.
When we launched Andrew, we were not focused on his disability. We helped him develop the skills to market himself as an architect. No one with a disability gets a job because of their disability. It's all about skills, and Andrew's a perfect example of someone that took what we helped him learn and was able to independently get a job in the private sector.
Do you run a small business in Minnesota? Are you trying to expand your operations? Or need help adjusting to changes brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic? Then contact your local Small Business Development Center.
We'd like you to know that whether you're starting a brand new business, growing an existing one, or if your business needs help because of the COVID pandemic, the SBDC can provide that help, and it won't cost you a penny.
These are hard times, but if you need help with your business, Small Business Development Centers have real professionals standing by, ready to help you develop your business plan, do marketing and research, set up your accounting, gain access to capital, and much more. And they do it all for free. So contact us today at mnsbdc.com.
In Minnesota, we're training our workforce for the next chapter of the global economy.
Can't wait to get started on this project.
It's great hands-on practice.
I think our students will love it.
I'll bring this to the robotics lab.
Our education and business climate are among the best in the nation. And they work together to grow creative, high-skilled talent.
Parts can we make it this machine? The possibilities are almost endless.
We're a state that works hard, boasting one of the highest participation rates in America's workforce.
Awesome, man. This looks great. We can really do anything here.
Great things are happening in Minnesota, and we can help you thrive.
Final touch, man. Checkmate.
Join us.
There we go. All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Governor's Council on Economic Expansion. Steve Grove here, Commissioner of DEED, and we're thrilled to have everyone here for our last official meeting of the council. We have some of us here in person at the DHS building in downtown St. Paul, and others are attending remotely due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and convenience reasons pursuant to Minnesota Statutes 13D.021. I think with that, I'll turn it over to the co-chairs of the council, Paul Williams and Jeff Ettinger. Paul.
I'm not sure if they had me down for this or you down for this.
Yes, you.
Okay, so I guess, well, welcome everyone. Good to see folks here in person. Good to see folks on screen. We have just our agenda today. Both kind of looking at reflections from phase 2, planning and vision activity, and how we have met kind of many of our stated goals. So really just kind of beginning to wrap up here. We're going to kind of look through the roadmap and kind of see final language additions and revisions. I think we're still in process, but very much closing in on our final product. And then just a little bit of kind of reflection on what we hope to see kind of going forward in terms of lasting legacy and impact. And we'll be using kind of our JAM board to do some of that capturing of all of that. So that's our agenda for the day. I think for the afternoon, just a note of thanks again, especially to the staff. Boy, this last couple of weeks, the staff have just been really going at it in terms of writing, revisions, reaching out to folks and kind of wrapping up loose ends. So big process, and thanks to the commissioners for taking time during what was a very busy session, obviously. Now I know you all have lots of time on your hands, right? Oh, no, wait, we have to run an agency actually. And then to the council members, just huge lift, and really in the midst of kind of the transition from the pandemic, it was wonderful to work with you all virtually, a little bit in person, but mostly just really appreciate the time that everybody gave to this. So Jeff, anything you want to add? No? Okay. So where are we going to? Are we going back to you, Liz, for roadmap review?
Sure. Yeah. Couple of things that I just want to flag, and Commissioner Grove, feel free to chime in on this as well. Final presentation date was scheduled July 27th at 11. So I think that's where we're at on that. And then, yeah, I think it's back to you all, Jeff and Paul, for just kind of, we made it through this big timeline, honoring that.
Yes, we made it through this big timeline. Jeff, do you want to just talk through the timeline here?
Well, sure. I mean, I'd love to actually go back to the beginning to think about the phase 1 work, because I mean, that was described as a sprint and we barely got a chance to catch our breath. And then you see what's up on the screen here for the second part. I think it was a really great suggestion for the second part to break the group into the subcommittees. The subcommittees really had a chance then to tackle on a deeper basis their topics, to not only host a session for the overall council, every one of us did that once, but also conducted numerous other interviews and other opportunities to learn from people within our state about these important issues. And then ultimately, as Paul was mentioning, I mean, we're so reliant and so thankful for the staffs, the professional people who have worked tirelessly since September and through now. And this roadmap is, I think it's just turned out marvelously and is a real credit to them being able to pull together so many concepts. I mean, that was, one of the a slight disadvantage maybe of subcommittees is we probably had 5 different styles and 5 different approaches in our drafts, but you'd never know it now once you see it all on a put together basis. So congratulations to everyone. Thanks, and look forward to, I guess it's literally a month from now will be our chance to present it to the governor and lieutenant governor, and look forward to that and see how the rest of this session goes. Paul, I'll give it back to you.
Okay, so Liz, I'm not sure. I'm trying to follow my bullets here.
That's okay. So this is something that maybe we all can have reflections on. When we met in November on the day that we were supposed to have our recommendations finalized, Amy and I asked people kind of what are your expectations and your vision for how phase 2 process goes. And that we did this in Jamboard. So I pulled these quotes from what you all had said. And I think looking at our final product and looking back at what we set out to do, there's a lot of reasons to celebrate what we have and the goals we accomplished. So I'll leave this up here for a minute and people can read it, but I thought it was powerful.
It seems like it was eons ago. It was November of 2021.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot has happened since then. So maybe while I pull up the roadmap, Jeff and Paul and the commissioners, do you all want to talk about kind of what the last few weeks of editing has been like and kind of what we've done in this last round of reviews? Maybe just at a high level. I'm going to pull up the roadmap.
Well, the kind of the planning group has been still connecting every week, and I think what we've really really the last couple of weeks, I think, has been running the language, not only having staff get the language kind of into a consistent form, but also running it by other key constituencies within state government, the governor's staff and the different governmental affairs teams within departments, those kinds of things. So that has again been very much a staff-driven process. We had a couple of outreach conversations during that time, which I think were helpful. One of the governor's stakeholder groups that we talked with. So, I think it's really been just kind of a process of revision. I know it's been open for public comment as well and council comment, and I'm not sure how much activity there's been in any or all of that, but really it's been out for kind of public view here, I would say, for the last couple of weeks. Is that right? Yeah. So good process, and again, at some point, we needed to have a small group of people just take it and write it and get it into the same kind of language. And I'm assuming that we're also getting it kind of some graphics and so forth added that I think will make it really look good.
Yeah, I think Paul hit the right points here. Not every member of the council knows every recommendation deeply. There were certainly some recommendations that felt like they were quite different from each other. And so where those recommendations, collided or intersected or lie on top of each other, we reached out specifically to those council members and talked it through and found ways to land them that I think still kept the spirit of what we're trying to do with, while still feeling like they belonged in the same document, if you will. And so you'll see some of those language changes in here. I think two of the areas in particular that staff spent time navigating with members were on education and public safety. Probably no surprise there, two very big issues that feature prominently in the report. And so those edits, again, on behalf of the council, have been taking place in earnest for the last few weeks. And I think integrating that public feedback has been really helpful too. The sessions that we did with the Governor's Office of Public Engagement, with tribal leaders, and then just organically with all the stakeholders that all of your subgroups met along the way did, I think, enrich and expand the report. It's an extensive report. I think we'll talk a little bit about what the thrust of it is and what sort of the big picture of it is. There's also a lot of details though too. And I think it's just an inherent assumption that maybe not every member of the council agrees 100% with every single bullet point in the report, in the sense that how could that possibly be the case? But what we've tried to land is something that feels like it's cohesive and that it shares the most important messages that we all felt were important for Minnesota's future. And I think we've done that. But I think one of the purposes of this final meeting is to make sure we all feel like that we've done that and we're kind of ready to roll with it. So I'll hand it back to Jeff and Liz, are we going to kind of walk through some of the points here as we look at the final report?
Yeah, so we'll just I can highlight a couple things at a high level that I've been tracking in the last couple of weeks. And again, thank you to everyone who has emailed with me about strategies as they're coming together last minute. It was super helpful to have people be responsive and give their feedback as we tried to make this read as one voice. So if you look at it on Teams, we have everything in there now. So we have the letter from Governor Walz. We had the preamble, which we changed to a message from the council to kind of match with the letter from the governor, really narrowing in on Minnesota's inflection point, and we got a lot of good feedback on there. And then we have a really short executive summary, which is basically a one-pager of the whole roadmap. So background, the phase 1 themes graphic comes back in. We felt that that still carried forward. It was a powerful graphic. So that'll be in the executive summary. A little bit of the process, all the vision statements, and then the roadmap and the strategies. So it from there goes into the vision, and I'm going to start scrolling, so sorry if people get whiplash. One of the things that I want to highlight from our message from the council is really focusing on like clear and direct equity language, that disparities and inequities aren't new, especially racial disparities. And so making that language stronger was one of the things we changed. And then also kind of having this, the language that we worked with a couple of equity directors on Black, Brown, Indigenous, and all communities of color, as well as historically and currently underserved communities, which for the rest of the report is just capitalized communities, except for areas where Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities of color are specifically called out. So that'll be nice. That'll be like an aesthetically pleasing call out box focused specifically on equity because it was such a huge priority for us. And then basically, yeah, the executive summary, background, themes, process, like I said, the roadmap being around our 5 commitments. So commit to our people, commit to our communities, commit to our businesses, commit to innovation, and commit to infrastructure as a way to organize our strategies. And then below, the strategies are listed, and then each strategy has like 8 to 10 tactics underneath it. And so in the vision, we have still some editing going on as we're getting feedback from the Gov. But this section didn't change at all that much. And the main thing that changed, as you can see in here, these strategies are still being worked through. I don't know, Commissioner Grove, if you want to add anything about just these are flags from the governor's office and they're still being cleaned up and worked on.
I would say they're more flags just from staff and our teams. I mean, as a matter of practical application, we wanted to run them through government relations leaders from each agency affected by these recommendations to make sure they kind of made sense and hung together, which was a very useful process. Got a lot of great feedback there. And the goal was to make sure that these things kind of hang together. And then again, where there were some areas of conflict between different groups, we ended up addressing different topics. And again, I think education and childcare were one of those arenas. We sought to try to find the spirit of what the recommendation was, while perhaps shifting some of the recommendation particulars that felt like they might be confusing to a reader. It might not ultimately make the thing land with the kind of strength that it wants to land, so that the whole report could be strong. But really, that was done at the staff level, done at the level of our team, kind of looking at this holistically. But I think they just want to take some time with this meeting to lift these up. I think in the education section, it had to do a lot with some of the conversations around charter schools, around how we land quality public education framing, and some of the licensing questions that I think we wanted to land kind of in concert with a few of the other pieces here. So a few final tweaks being made here. I will say the fact that we're not producing this Thursday, but rather a month from now, does give us a little bit of leeway before we're officially out the door. So council members will have a chance to look at the final version as these edits kind of finalize themselves. But obviously, given we're meeting today, I wanted to lift these up here. So thoughts or questions on any of that? I don't know, Paul or Jeff, if you wanted to weigh in on any of that piece. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so both with education and with public safety, we're really focusing on clarity and consistency. I know for public safety, sorry, it's not letting me scroll down right now. My mouse is, okay. I know for public safety, a large part of the shift was to make it more inclusive language beyond policing, which was, I think it's down here. Okay, I don't know where it is. But yeah, so with these, it was just consistency and clarity based on the feedback from our various staff and policy people. And then one of the other big things that we changed throughout where possible was anytime we talked about co-creation, we just built that language out a little stronger. So it's co-creating with communities shows up in a lot of places. And then we actually built out a strategy in this commit to innovation where we kind of pulled and expanded strategies from other places and added in particular, after our meeting with the tribes, a strategy specifically about co-creating around economic development with tribal partners. So those were kind of the main edits. The rest of it was just little language tweaks. So any questions on that? And then we will transition to a more interactive part of the meeting.
So yeah, we will circulate this obviously at the end of the meeting for people to take a look. And again, the areas that were evolved in the last few weeks, we've been addressing again with the specific groups that made the recommendations to make sure everyone's understands how this came together and has a chance to weigh in on kind of final wording. So yeah, look forward to sharing that a little bit later. And again, we have about a month till it gets published, but of course, team wants to lock this up and get everything designed and ready for our approval before we go live.
Yeah, Juhi. Oh, Commissioner, can you pass the microphone back? Thank you.
So one of the things I noticed when I was looking through the roadmap is that we kind of have like metrics mixed in with tactics. And I'm wondering if it's worthwhile making a distinction or separating out or leaving out metrics for the moment. Well, just to Steve's question of metrics of what type, just in that education piece, it stood out that we would be the #1 payer of teachers or something. And that just, I mean, I guess that's a tactic to increase teacher pay, but it also just feels out of place to these more kind of strategic and a little more open type of recommendations that are in there.
Sure. I mean, a lot of us could address this. I mean, I think it's a great point. There are varying levels of altitude that we come at in this report, right? Some of them are like super specific, like, you know, to your point on things that have a defined number to them. Others are more general. And I think to take your one example of Minnesota being the top state in the country for teacher pay, we talked a lot about this one, Anoka, myself, Joe, and Brett, from whom that one came. We originally said every teacher should be paid $100,000 or more, which again felt bold, but also that would be quite high and something that we kind of debated, does that make sense or not? I think where we've gotten specific, at least from what I've viewed, and certainly our subgroup and others that I've read, is where when the specificity lent itself to a nice, bold statement. So to say something so bold as to say we're going to pay teachers better here than any other state in the country speaks to, I think, an underlying thing that our group heard again and again from stakeholders, which is that at the fundamental issue of whether schools work or not, you have to have great teachers in classrooms navigating the whole host of challenges classrooms face. And so a big part of that is compensating teachers. Now, you can make a compensation argument on a lot of different job categories. So it is kind of a slippery slope, admittedly. I think our group felt like it was bold enough and big enough of an issue in that sector that it was worth lifting up. But there was debate. You're not the first person that's raised this as something like, do we want to say that or not? Does it make sense? But we felt like it kind of made the point that you need quality teachers to have a quality school system. And so that level of specificity we did keep in. But, this meeting is about us lifting up areas we might still want to reevaluate. So if that's something that you or others are just not comfortable with, we can certainly address it. But you're right, it kind of, parts of it feel differently because of how specific we got to make our points. So I don't know if anybody else wants to offer thoughts on that one or others.
I think, Jokey, to your point too, that I saw that sometimes there were specific things, and I mentioned this, I think, at one of our meetings, that I think that, if we were to summarize in some kind of like how will we know fashion, what we will have achieved, and have a separate, and maybe even a separate session following the commitments of that might get to Jokey pulling out those things that you're saying that are kind of now within, but not explicitly. I'd love to say, okay, how will we know we're going to be successful? And part of it goes to some of those measures of success that we talked about.
Yeah, so that's certainly feedback that we've heard, and maybe something that we can explore now that we have a little bit more time. I just, we've heard that along the way, and as part of making it cohesive, this is kind of what emerged, but we can definitely look at it from a metrics or evaluative type lens and see if we can pull something out. So yeah, I think as long as we don't veer from the language that's already in here too much, we'll be good. Good. So any other thoughts on that?
I'll just add one small point on this too. There's just the narrative structure issue of having strategy, tactic throughout, which started to feel kind of like fatiguing. So part of it was just glomping the stuff together in like-minded buckets that made sense, even if, to your point, some of them are kind of strategies and some of them are kind of tactics. Some of them are just kind of ideas too.
I opened it, I'll close it. So our group, the Holistic Supports Group, we talked a lot about pay as well. And so, to the point that your group of why you put number one for teacher pay, I wonder if there could be something that would be a little broader and inclusive of essential workers or something, that we have, because we talked a lot about in healthcare, childcare, the low pay and struggles that creates, and then that has an impact on the people they're supposed to be protecting.
I was just going to say, I did notice, I didn't have a chance to sort of meet the review deadline because I had just a couple of other things going on. But I did notice, one thing I just would want to say is that we heard a lot about sort of the various disparities that exist and where relevance, like cultural relevance, either in education or in other settings, is really important. And I saw some of the softening of that language in here. I actually saw it pulled out of the childcare. And so I guess I would respectfully ask that it actually be included back into the childcare section, because it's not just about extended hours, right?
Yeah. If you want to make a comment, Barty, we can update it.
Yeah, I will do it. I was looking on it, right? I figured out how to do it on my phone. I promise I'll do it. But I guess I just don't want us to lose that thread, because this is the moment where we stand by that statement and that understanding in that body of work, or we don't. And I guess I just want us to hold that. And there is something about wage throughout, right? That was, and I struggled, to be honest with you, in childcare about yes, and the wage and affordability and the both at the same time. So I do think that there's something there. I've got no good idea about how, but I felt like wage was in lots of different places. and maybe it's its own thing, or I don't know. And I know we're like coming down to the wire, but I was thinking the same thing too upon review. So I just wanted to say that I heard you. Sorry, let me.
I was just wondering, while we're in a discussion mode, if it's possible to toggle so we can see the remote members of the council rather than once we get back to language, that
Yes,
would be.
let me pull them over.
And also obviously encourage them to.
Yes, please turn on your
Participate.
cameras, remote participants.
They're all in hiding. I guess I was just going to add, Juhi, I kind of had a similar reaction, honestly. That's not that aspiration wasn't motivating and important, but just to me, it was, especially when I saw it the first time at the $100,000, I guess, being more of a business market-based person, just the notion that, okay, we're just going to pick a number, and that there just seems like there's always unseen consequences to those kind of movements. Okay, if we're going to do that, and what happens down the road that we've now dedicated this much to the education budget, but what if we have to take it out of somebody else's budget because we set the standard and that was where it was? And then secondly, just the notion that there's so many other areas where the pay equity issue is very salient, and so will it look kind of almost weird or just stand out that, we have this one that we really called out so significantly? Does that almost kind of have a negative connotation about the importance of the other ones?
And it's good to start discussion, and we shared some of this feedback with the staff as we were coming through it. What I'm struck by is we didn't have the luxury of a time for cross review. And so when I don't have that kind of time, I defer to the small groups. And so I didn't spend a ton of time. I don't have the time to dig into the thinking behind other recommendations. And so I think at a certain point, because of the way this process was structured, we have to accept the language that each of the small groups came up with. And so I've given some feedback to the staff that I wasn't necessarily comfortable with changing. Now, again, there's some other issues of concerns around the charter school, some of the education language. That's the language that came up in that small group, and I feel like we need to defer to that language. Similarly to, I was a little bit, as Jeff mentioned, I was a little bit uncomfortable with the $100,000. Staff has edited that out, but I could have questions about calling out teacher pay and shared some of that concern about other essential workers. Why aren't they included? So that's a long way of saying I feel like the council and the subgroups have done a lot of work, and to the extent that we can make some revisions that create consistency in terms of format and language, I don't know that I want to go and try and revise kind of the actual messages and recommendations and substance of what's being put together. Because again, the time that we had really was structured in a way that was geared towards, to Barty's point, right? Feels important to have that disparity language in there. That's what came out of that subgroup. So long-winded answer, but that's my 2 cents.
No, I think that's great, and I think it's a really valid consideration and kind of a result of having subgroups too. It's just part of the process. But yeah, if you have edits, get them in there as soon as possible, though. Okay, so are we ready to kind of shift to our review discussion? Jeff and Paul, we're ready to switch to that? Okay. And for those of you who are online, it's going to be Jamboard. I put it in the chat, so feel free to pull that up. We'll do a little bit of reflection, and then we should talk about our strategy or kind of what you want to put forward when we meet with the Gov. So I will navigate to that.
So the question for the Jamboard exercise is that question around, yeah, there we go.
And people in the room, if you have your laptop, you can do it on your laptop or on your phone, or you can raise your hand and I can write it on a Post-it. Yeah, the Wi-Fi, you can't really see it very well.
See it pull up. It doesn't pull up.
I can, Nick, do you want to put it in the chat or are you in the meeting? Or if you tell it to me, I can put it in the chat.
They can't read it if it's in chat.
I'm gonna type it on a Post-it right now.
It says D guest 1. Although that doesn't show up on the list of Wi-Fi networks.
WN.
Oh, okay.
B75.
Okay.
Oh, technology.
Oh, I see.
Brr, brr, brr.
There we go.
Oh, sharing privileges. Okay.
Minnesota Guest Wi-Fi.
That's
And dguest1 is the username.
Oh.
Password is,
WNR.
and the password is case sensitive.
Yeah, it's not pulling up for me.
So yeah, we can just take a couple minutes for people to brainstorm and put on 2 or 3 ideas, and then I can pull the people online back over and we can all talk. I put the link in the chat, so if you can get to the chat and click the link. I put the link to the Jamboard in the chat. Can you get to the chat? Okay. Maybe I'll try and paste it again and it'll show up. Again? Yeah, because were you not in the call like a little bit ago? Okay, so I just resent it. Did it show up this time? In the chat? Okay.
Like all the stuff, I only have all the stuff. Maybe the next. Like I can't access. I have Teams at work. I have meetings.
Okay. I'm gonna email you guys.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Email me, Julie.
Yes. I will. I'm gonna email everyone.
Why don't we in the room just holler out and the folks online?
Yeah.
Yeah. That works.
Okay.
You're like, oh my god.
We take advantage of the fact that we're actually here.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Just yell out and I will add it. And sorry that the tech is.
I never
Yes, Amy will
got
add them.
online, but I have comments that I can add.
Amy will add them.
So I actually, what I found myself jotting down here in terms of what will be a lasting legacy and impact is just some of the messages from the broader reports. I think, so I hope a legacy will be that readers and leaders, really understand the inflection point, that this really is a transformative moment. I think that's a really important message in this whole thing. That's kind of a statement of the obvious, but I do hope that's a lasting impact. There's another message in the report here that incremental won't get it done. That the incremental shifts, and again, this was in our small group in particular, but this notion that small incremental changes and shifts aren't what's needed here. And then a third message that I took out was it's not an irony, but in fact, investment in core human needs turns out to be key to economic expansion. So when you look across this, childcare, housing, education, infrastructure, I mean, there's a bunch of just really basic core investments that need to be made in order to move the needle on economic expansion. And I think that's actually a powerful message. That came out of our first phase, I think, as well. So certainly business expansion, small business entrepreneurship, lots of other elements of kind of traditional economic expansion, traditional economic development are absolutely needed. But a bunch of this is about investment in the core. So I hope that is a message, a set of messages that really are taken away from this, in addition to lots of individual recommendations.
Well, maybe just build on what Paul said. First of all, the people who wrote the preamble and those things, I think you really captured it really well. So I want to say that good job.
Thank you to Grove and Barty and Joe.
Good job on that, because I think it caught the messages you're saying about, inflection points, small won't get it done, and also be careful about Minnesota exceptionalism. So it captured all of that we brought in. The one thing that I'd like to see as legacy is, that we have needed action towards eliminating disparities that are so profound in our state. So that's what I'd say in terms of what I hope the lasting legacy will be.
I guess I'm just hoping that in the end, 10 years from now, everybody who wants to participate in Minnesota's economy gets to do so and has access to it. And it was able to have, was able to uplift themselves economically in a way that shows, some of the decisions that, or the recommendations we made truly made a difference in those individuals' lives and the lives of their family. That to me is the legacy of this and why we're trying to do it. That's a long, sticky note, though.
I think the only thing that I would add is that, I feel like it's in the beginning or preamble or whatever we're calling it, but I think we've gotten as far as we're going to get as we have been. that if we want to go to the next level, like something's got to be needed. Like we can't keep coasting because it's just not going to work, right? And I think that's the thing that I hope that people get out of it is that, like, just that I think we're as far as we're going to get if we're going to keep on the way we are. And there's a cost in inaction as much as there is a cost or a risk to action. So I hope that comes through.
No, Judy.
So I was pondering a note of intentionality that, we can make all the tweaks we want to what exists, kind of to Barty's point, that we can, tweak whatever is going on right now, but without intentionality is to both recognizing and making up for our history, but then also really being intentional as to what that vision for our future is. We can't just leave it up to market forces. We can't just leave it up to like trickle down concepts. We have to be intentional about those investments and making sure those investments go directly where we want them.
I was coming. Okay, I was coming from a place of just like there are just so many things and everything is intersectional and how complicated it is. And we all get that. And I'm kind of processing our conversation earlier around teacher pay. And that was one of my biggest things. I really wanted it to be in there, particularly because I come from a background in education. And it doesn't mean that means that other things are less important. And so I wonder, like, that's what I was trying to write, was like, I wonder if we can be in a place where it's not about like, if we invest in this, then this gets taken away. We don't invest in that. That's not as important, but rather can we like talk in a way that's more, it's a yes. And there are a lot of places that's going to need a lot of support. And can we do it in a meaningful way? Can we do it in a targeted way? Yeah, that's where my brain is at right now.
Thanks. Ever since we were together in this room before, I've been stuck on Wellstone that we all do better when we all do better. And I couldn't get the Post-it note to underline all the second time. But that's been really clear to me. And I think if this group with these titles and roles in the community were to say that really clearly, I think it'd be really, really impactful. And then, Joe, I just want to ask you a question. When you say people who want to participate or I think you said participate in the economy can, I just have this jerk reaction. The Minnesota Family Investment Program is designed to give short-term cash to families who have barriers to employment to get them into the workforce, but people think that people stay on welfare because they don't want to work. And I don't know if that's what you're referring to, or if that's not at all in your head, because it makes me wonder if the report would trigger that.
Not that hard to find out.
Right. Can't afford childcare.
Something closer than other people like that.
Yes.
So trying to make
Mm-hmm.
They can't hear you, Joe. So maybe the mic, you got to have the mic. And if you just want to summarize, Joe was just addressing the commissioner's question.
Just addressing the commissioner's question. No, I was coming at it from a position of, people are saying there's jobs everywhere, everybody wants employment, should be able to find it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right job for their family or that it provides the economics that are needed to support their family and put them in a middle class lifestyle. Everybody wants to be in that position, and I'm trying to make sure that everybody has that opportunity to be in a middle class living, hopefully affordable health care and retirement pension benefits, retirement with dignity. That to me is, I think everybody wants that, and trying to make sure what we do makes it so that's available to everybody who does want that, to meet them where they're at. Because not everybody, as I was saying, what you couldn't hear online was not everybody can drive 45 miles to commute to that job that really fits their skill set. They may have kids, they can't work nights, et cetera, et cetera. So just trying to make sure that there's economic opportunity, not just in employment, but just all the way around. And that also goes into somebody with that ability helping somebody else get in that ability. So that's more so what I meant by it.
Thank you. Well, I like what you just said, and you said a couple times, everybody wants that. And I wonder if my first reaction when I saw that piece in the draft was, can we assume that everybody wants that and help everybody get that? And we want to be careful about that language, I think.
Before I make a couple comments, I'm going to put out a warning. So I know what it's like to be the outstate person and getting in to participate when you're not live. So Scott, Tracy, Marcus, and Jody, I see that you're on, and I'm going to call on each of you next before I pass the mic on. But I'll give you a couple minutes here while I make a couple comments.
Yeah, I gave him a heads up, Jeff.
Okay, very good. So, first of all, I really appreciated that the subcommittees took the assignment to really project ourselves into the future and think, okay, 10 years is as good a total as any, but it could be 15, whatever, and think about where we want to be as a state then. This is probably a very ambitious statement, but I've always hoped that our work will be able to withstand political crosswinds over a multi-year period of time. You just never know what the world's going to bring in that regard. But I thought most of the themes that we've centered on, both in phase 1 and in phase 2, were things that should be generally accepted by people who want to see Minnesota do well. And so I'm excited to see that. My other comment relates to that although our whole assignment sort of emanates from the state. I mean, it was Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan who pulled this group together and asked us to comment on it, that we have emphasized in the report, and I think we need to continue to emphasize as implementation ever gets going, that it's not just a state thing. I mean, it needs to be citizens and businesses and nonprofits and local governments, and especially communities. That was something I guess I learned from other panel members and from some of our speakers over the course of months, is not all these solutions should just be a new state program with state employees. We have a lot of people already out there who, if they just had more adequate resources and the support of the state or the entities, we could probably get a lot more done that way. Otherwise, I guess I'll, unless they fight me and refuse to do it, I guess I'm going to call on these folks. So we're going to start with you, Scott.
Jeff, can you turn the mic red? No, they're just really quiet. So we're gonna try and mute our mics, and then Scott, we might have to play with the sound for a minute. Eric, it was working earlier for you to talk. Can you maybe test your mic first? Something is happening with our room audio, so give me a moment.
I mean, while we're doing that, maybe I can let Rosalind kind of got skipped on round 1, so maybe we can get her input while you're trying to pull that up.
Well, I must say that it has truly been an honor to participate in this group. I've learned so much from each of the participants. And it's just been a real thrill. When I read through this, the thing that strikes me is that the Minnesota elitism sort of come through in this document. And the reality is we can't live off our legacy. We have to do something different. The legacy of being a wonderful place and being the leaders and being the leader in many significant areas, I don't think that will take us into the next decade unless we really start to think about how to bring everyone along. And so I appreciate your comments, Joe, that everyone who wants to participate should be able to participate. And the way I see that is a little inverted in that there will not be systematic obstacles that interfere with individuals participating. And so I think it's twofold. And I also feel like that there is a bit of work that needs to be undone. we're seeing some of this take place even on the national level, but I don't see Minnesota continuing to be the best of the best in class if we cannot bring others along, because the population is not growing in the direction that will allow companies to continue to simply just sort of X out significant populations. So I agree with Commissioner Harpstead. We all do better when we all do better, but somewhere along the line, it seems like certain sections of society does not seem to embrace that, like there isn't an awareness or a conscious about overlooking certain segments. So I believe the work that we've done is a good blueprint of where we can go. Particularly, I think what this report does best is it specifically identify the areas that we have to do better in, but it still take people. We know we have to improve childcare. We know we have to improve education. We know we have to improve the workforce. But that human element, putting people in that discussion, particularly people who've been left out of the discussion historically, that is what will transform where we're at today. Not just identifying the program, but the awareness that it will take people to do this. And there are people already here. You just have no idea how frustrating it is for me to hear the conversation all around, and when there is a keen awareness that there are so many folks being overlooked. So I hope that this report speaks to not just government, but also speak to businesses to raise this awareness. It's like, it's not just going to go away. We can't wish that the white population was growing at the same rate that people of color are moving into the state, and we've got to do something about it. So it's been real, but I think we have a long way to go.
Okay, Scott, can you try talking again?
Let's try. He's got to leave.
Yeah. Yes, we got you.
Brief to the conversation.
helping kind of reinvigorate our energy towards creating kind of the next Minnesota Miracle, so that if somebody grows up in Duluth, they can stay there and be successful and achieve their life's goals and dreams. And if somebody grows up, is born in a part of the city where their neighbors and their neighborhood are challenged, that they can do the same thing. And I think we've captured that well. It's not perfect, like Marcus just said, but I appreciate the chance to work with you on it. And I really appreciate the level of specificity that came out, because I think it will challenge people to take real action. So thanks.
Do you want me to go? Okay, this is Tracy, everybody. I appreciate all of the comments that everybody shared, and I'm looking forward to the release of this report. You know, for me, I think one of the things about this report that I hope kind of is a lasting legacy is that it, I think, puts a lot of emphasis on the human capital that we have here in Minnesota, and a caring for and a removing of barriers that some people are facing. You know, our economy can't grow without the people that live in the state of Minnesota contributing and working towards the growth of our economy. And so I appreciate the fact that that is so prevalent in the report. And I would also add that I heard something in a news story this morning where someone was talking and saying, you know, the way to solve a problem is that if people just educate themselves and be responsible for themselves, you know, everything is going to work out as it should. And that, you know, obviously the point was people aren't educating themselves and they're not taking responsibility for themselves. I don't personally believe that is the population as a whole. We can always find individuals maybe who are not as responsible as they could be. But the reason that I bring it up is I think that Minnesota has a long legacy and narrative of, you know, people that can pull themselves up by their bootstraps and start with nothing and end up with something substantial, you know, whether that be a business that you own or what you were able to reap from the land and build wealth in your family. And I hope that the report helps to continue the narrative that while Minnesotans are strong and capable people, there are systems in place that are making it more difficult for some people than they should be. And I just think that we need more and more people to continue to understand that it's not just a matter of if we all tried harder, no matter how hard some people try, they're not on the same playing field as other people. And we heard that a lot from the people that came and shared stories with us, their own personal stories, stories of their communities, the organizations that they work in. And I hope that message continues to grow and that people of Minnesota will have a willingness to believe that there is truth in that and there is something that we can do to change that moving forward. So sorry, that was a lot, but that's kind of me.
Okay, and sorry, group, if there is still an echo, but I think we're going to move on to our second Jamboard slide. And
we still have Jody if she's on.
It was Commissioner Harpstead. Jody Hugler's not on.
Jody.
Yeah, that's the Jody. So.
Very good.
So I do want to talk at a high level and get your thoughts on the strategy for the final presentation. And I think we can do it kind of in the way that the council feels like it would have the highest impact to the governor, rather than we could definitely do a laundry list, but there's probably a creative way to talk about things, and I'm interested in your thoughts.
I guess I have the mic, so I'll start and then I'll pass it on to someone else. I mean, given summer realities, given even, okay, today's, okay, here's how many folks were able to come versus not. I mean, I really feel like the starting point for the presentation at Tracy's location would be who can come. I mean, I thought that having as many members of the council as possible present the way we did after phase one was great. But I think we need to be realistic about, okay, so who's able to do that? And once we know who's able to do that, I mean, that might help us more logically figure out both numerically and maybe in terms of themes or areas of emphasis, who should kind of be part of which part. That's my suggestion, at least.
My question is, I understand that, yes, this is, a task that the governor has given upon us, but is it him that we need to convince, or is it the people who are going to be impacted? You know what I mean? Like, we're talking about this needs to be 10 years from now. So we don't know if this particular governor is going to be in office. And so is it more around to the voters or to the folks who are going to be holding that power, making those decisions on behalf of, and in utilizing a recommendation? So that's just a question that I have.
It's a great question. I think a couple of thoughts. One, the way that the executive order is written, the governor asked it to be submitted to him. So in some sense, he is the audience just by the definition of having convened the council and wanting to hear it. But it's a great point because I think as a council, we've all called out that this isn't just a list for the governor and legislature, but there's business leaders, nonprofits, what have you. And I think we just need to make that point when we present. Just breaking down the mechanics of it. I mean, we'll have an hour. He'll probably want to take 10 minutes from the press. Press will be there because he and the LG will be in attendance. And so you got 50 minutes really. And then he'll have pre-read it. So he'll know the stuff before we get into the room. About it a little bit is like, what's the highlight reel and what's the points that you all most want to make in front of him? And kind of to your point, more importantly, in front of Minnesota. Like that's probably how we should think about how we use the airtime. Because then I think he'll also want to respond, and so will she. And so, when you boil it down, I think, what did we end up doing last time, Paul and Jeff? Like maybe 15 minutes of presentation or something max. And then it was kind of discussion and conversation. I think we might have even had less than an hour last time. So just a couple of thoughts to add to the conversation here.
I liked the last presentation as well, and we had a number of different voices, and we didn't cover everything. We had, pick one or two highlights from the cluster that each council member was speaking from. Now, we've organized ourselves a little bit differently here under each of the commitments, which we still could do. So, I mean, to your point, Jeff, maybe we see who's going to be able to make it, and I do like having different voices. And I actually do like the very first exercise we did with the governor was introduce ourselves and say a little bit of something about why you're passionate about being here, which allowed each person to bring a little bit of themselves, to that introduction. And so I mean, if we end up getting 5 or 6 council members, finding a way to divvy up just highlights from the report so that we don't want to get into too much detail, I think, but still bring a little bit of the thinking from the report, as well as a little bit of something that each of the speakers thought was really, compelling and important in the process.
Last time, I think the two of you as chairs did a nice job of doing the heavy lifting of just giving a quick overview of how the thing is structured. So you tick all the boxes of like, okay, we these vision statements, we had these roadmaps, we had just so you kind of get a holistic sense. And then it feels to me like we need to choose one area to get into more deeply. Do we choose the 5 commitments? Do we choose the 5 vision statements? Do we do both? I don't know, but one way to look at it would be to choose one of those 2 lists of 5, if you will, as kind of the structure of the presentation. I think the commitments might be the best call there just because the strategies live underneath them. So you kind of use the commitments as your actual presentation moment and maybe pick out a few that, and to your point on divvying it up, maybe different people take each commitment, but that way the two of you as leaders can kind of share how we thought about this holistically, and then the commitments become kind of where the council can share.
No, I like that approach a lot. The one thing I hope doesn't get lost, and I know you'll bring it, is that, I mean, this sense of urgency, this sense of an inflection point, this sense of small is not big enough, the sense is we're going to be in the same place all the time. I think if we had one key message, that would probably be it. There's content underneath all of that. But it's like, we got big issues to solve and the time is right now. So how do we make sure that that message doesn't get lost as, some people, sometimes when we're going into tactics, people, so, I just want to make sure that that's profoundly said.
Yeah, and one of the things that we can do, I mean, that may be something that Jeff and I can divvy up some kind of overview of structure, and one of us can cover the preface or the preamble. And just really, because I agree, those are the things that I want to see as the lasting legacy and kind of impact. So, but I don't know if have we sent out an appointment yet to know how many folks just went out today? So let's just kind of see what that looks like, and then I agree, Jeff or Steve, that the commitments probably are the key things to highlight there.
There's some action online. Scott or Tracy, do you want to chime in?
I was just going to add, I know it might be challenging, but it would be great to get some voices of maybe people who are struggling and looking for something from our work. In that I wouldn't necessarily say that those people would need to present, but I've obviously been in a lot of different formats where like a video testimonial works well. So I do wonder if there's not a tight kind of intro that sort of sets the stage with maybe even some intros from people, quick short hits from around the state, and then a little more on the commission, and then we kind of go into the rest of our discussion. And I think it would be powerful if we can do it, if it's practical. I don't know what resources are there to get some kind of tighter, 2 to 3 minute overview at the front end that's maybe video based. It might allow us to bring more people into, depending on who's able to attend in Wyoming. So that was just my thought.
Obvious question there. Again, I love that idea, Scott, and I don't know if we have any capabilities or the capacity to pull something together here in the next month, and or if we have any snippets or vignettes that we might be able to take from some of our virtual meetings. Now, I don't know if we have a great video editor who can splice some of those together, but I have to imagine, and again, we heard from a wide variety of different folks. Scott, I don't know that it entirely gets at what you're.
I mean, I think of the format even of a PPL breakfast, making its pitch. You kind of have a whole. There's something that is missed when you jump right into the kind of written output, academic output of the group. That's kind of loses the emotive part of what we might be trying to draw people into here, about the moment, about the inflection point, about the fact that we really we have abundance throughout our state, and yet have been unable to lay the groundwork for a better future. I just think there's a lot there that we could draw on that's much more emotive than here are our recommendations, here's the work we did, et cetera. And I hope that we're less process driven than that in the presentation.
I like this a lot. I agree with Paul and Scott. I think it's a good flag. Why don't we take that back with the team and see what's doable? I just given staff time and things, don't want to necessarily commit to that right now, but it's a very good point that you don't hold the press conference to walk through 50 slides of PowerPoint on ideas. You hold it to create a feeling. So how we create that feeling is critical. So whether it's videos or guests, maybe, I don't know, Liz, Elizabeth, Nick, we can just give that some thought. Yeah,
we can think about that. I'm excited by doing something that's like catchy and interesting. So
yeah.
And maybe in addition to something like that, I'm also thinking back to like what brought us here as council members, right? If that is all too hard to pull together, because a month is a hot minute.
Like people's initial priorities, like first meeting.
So
Yeah.
the thing I shared in the first meeting was the mom I met, and economic security for her meant the ability to have dance lessons for her daughter. And I've held that woman in my heart and head every day that I come to these meetings. And I think there are different people, there are different understandings, there are different circumstances that we might have. And if that is too hard, I think on some level, this has been a very academic exercise, but we are also the human element. And if that's just hard, right? I think we can also bring a little bit of human element here too. I'm just saying, because I think it's also hard. And there's a little part of me that always worries a little bit about like bringing people with lived experience on display in front of the press and others in a certain kind of way. And I think I'm holding that a little bit. Like, I can be the human element. I can stand here and share if that is helpful. Not that I want to silence any community voice, but I just want to be really clear about like just that too. So I'm just saying we also have a wealth of human here.
Right.
I'm
It's
just
funny
saying.
that you've cut
And
yourselves out of this, like, because you all are compelling speakers.
We did. So I mean, I'm just saying we can bring it.
We're human too. Okay, it's a yes, and I also think that this particular group, and I feel like I've been saying this from the get-go too, is that there is a sense of prestige around the folks who are being pulled into this room and making decisions on behalf of Minnesota. And so I think that there is a balance around, like, I can't represent all, I mean, I'm supposed to represent all nonprofits, but I cannot literally do that. And so I feel like there needs to be a balance between, like, yes, we are here and tasked with this very important decision, and that we also need to somehow showcase that there's some inclusivity, at least intentional way of trying to include more voices as much as we could have given the short amount of time that we had. So.
Just one other creative idea to get at this might be quotes that we pull from the presentations and or other, and again, depending on staff capacity to pull this together. I think that could be just another way to capture. I don't know where I heard it today, but there was one from a BIPOC entrepreneur that said, I have plenty of mentorship. I have no capital. Right? I can't get enough. I have plenty of mentorship. I don't have any capital. Powerful statements like that, I think, could be compelling.
I'm wondering if we couldn't, I just worry, like you say, the pressure on if you bring somebody new in, do they really want to share their story? Like, I've been involved with Wallen Education Partners as a donor for quite a while. And initially, even in their applications, they would kind of like almost bare their souls a bit. And yes, that's compelling, but it's also incredibly intrusive. And so maybe it would be better if it's council members either recounting things you know from your own community's own experience, or even reading some of the quotes from other things that somebody already did share with us, as opposed to kind of starting from scratch with either a video or with anybody live. Just a thought.
Yeah, we do have a couple of quotes that were approved that some council members recommended to us, and we do have consent from a couple people to use those quotes. So relaying that could be powerful as well.
So I think maybe just to wrap this up, wrap up this idea, I hear two things basically. One is that we want to make sure that people who read this know that we didn't sit in a room with whiteboards for 6 months and figure this out without talking to anybody. So there's just kind of the show don't tell piece of that. And the second piece is to try to bring some of that voice into the meeting in a way that feels right. On the first, I think we can just integrate that into the presentation. On the second, maybe let us have some comms thoughts as a team on your behalf and throw some ideas out there. I think a lot of good ideas here, video, quotes, real people, sensitivity considerations, all there. I will just say this, the governor and LG on your behalf are going to want to lift up all of you. I mean, they are so grateful that you've done this, and that will come from their voice, not yours. But the fact that 15 people from a huge cross-section of backgrounds, industries, professions, perspectives came together, as one council and put this forward is inherently the power of the report itself. And I think in terms of its lasting legacy, if this puts a button on the fact that this is an inflection point, in large part, it's really due to all of you being on the council and giving of your time and being that diverse set of voices. And that's not something we expect you to go out there and shout, but the governor will and Lieutenant Governor will, because they're very proud of the work that you've done. So that'll come through, I think, in the right way as a note of gratitude and kind of communication that's outside of what you all will have to do to kind of stand up and feel self-conscious about being that person who shares in that sense. I think it'll be wrapped up in how we roll it out from a comms perspective. I know we have just 8 minutes left and we wanted to talk about next steps. Paul and Jeff, are you okay if we move into that final piece here? Okay. So just a couple of things, and Elizabeth, who's online, can just feel free, Elizabeth, to shout out if I miss anything, but just in terms of kind of next steps. So we are finalizing the roadmap as we speak. I would just say kind of to the points brought up here today, we are hoping by the end of this week to have the thing fit and finished, like design done. We don't have to worry about that part anymore because of course there's the rollout components. So I think we've captured a lot of the feedback of this meeting, but if you have anything else, can you let us know today, like just literally by kind of end of day, not close of business, but end of day, if there's any last thing that you want to raise up, let's do that. We've had lots of feedback cycles and great conversation yet today, but I think if we could wrap up the final bits of feedback today, that would help the team. And then July 27th, again, thanks to Tracy, we'll be there at Wyoming Machine in Stacy. It's, I want to say 45 minutes or an hour northeast of here. 11 a.m. is the start time there. We'll do a prep meeting between now and then just to prepare for that rollout. So we've taken your feedback here today. Also, frankly, we've kind of designed our talking points as we go by hearing what you want this report to do. So we'll have all that wrapped up for the group to take a look at. When we are rolling this out, we've got a lot of resources we'll want you to use. And I think important to stress, and we'll stress this again, like you are the voice of the report. And so as much that you can do to bring this to your networks, we want to empower you to do that through social media graphics, messaging, sample content, what have you. We're really hoping that you, the organizations you represent, the networks you can tap into can help us amplify it. We're going to try to do some quick follows after that first announcement. So it'll come out on the 27th, as we said. We're hoping the very next day with the governor to do another event somewhere in the metro, kind of as a quick follow-up, perhaps focusing on a few specific issues within the council, for which we'd love to have anybody who can come to come. And I think the hope there is that the governor and LG would engagement, we hope, on August 9th in Greater Minnesota. So kind of thinking about this in terms of 3 events: a press conference over at Tracy's shop, a fast follow the next day in the metro, we hope, and then on August 9th, a Greater Minnesota stop. I think that Greater Minnesota stop, Penny and Jody and others in the health group will focus on health and mental health in particular, is an area that the Gov and LG wanted to drill into based on the report. So talking points to come. Again, a lot of them we just kind of created here as a team. Social media graphics and press release, you'll all see that stuff before it comes out. And then I believe as a kind of mechanical matter, we were just discussing this earlier today, we'll have to actually do a vote on this thing on the day that we release it. You may remember in our first phase 1, we all had to literally vote to approve the phase 1. So just be prepared for that in our first meeting to have a brief procedural moment before we kind of dive into the meat of it. So Elizabeth, are you on? Did I miss anything you want to raise to the group?
I think that covers it, Commissioner. Thanks.
Okay. And then just, this is ongoing. That's what we can see ahead for 60 days, but from there, hopefully there'll be a lot more.
Question on the vote. Will we be together? Do we need a quorum, anything like that? I'm just thinking about the logistics.
We do need a quorum, and we have not defined a quorum, so I think whoever's there will be the quorum. But we'll run it by council because
Okay.
I'm not a lawyer.
Right, and is it possible to do it by electronically? Is it possible to do it electronically?
I
Who knows?
we
Check
will
with
look
council on
into
that
that
as
and
well.
check with
Thanks.
council. Thank you.
That stuff actually does matter. Yeah. Okay. So more to come on that, but just didn't want that to be a surprise. I don't know, Liz or Elizabeth, anything else you want to say before we wrap? I'll turn it back to Jeff and Paul before we wrap the meeting, but we did want to take a moment to thank you all. And there's this small gift on this way to all of you, barring supply chain challenges, of a small plaque of gratitude that I know the Governor and LG are excited to give to all of you for your service. And we're just grateful. This has been a really fantastic journey for all of us. We know you've given far more time than you probably ever thought you were going to give to this effort. But we think it's going to last. It's a dang good report, and I think it's really powerful. And I think it's powerful because of all of you and how you brought yourselves to this process. So Jeff and Paul, I'll turn it to you before we wrap.
Well, I think when Paul and I first heard about this and saw the timelines, we kind of gasped and wondered, okay, is this really doable? But with the spirit and energy that everyone brought to the task, combined with, I mean, I think the focus and the inspiration, as people have said, of the moment, that, okay, this is an important thing to be doing anytime, but it's a particularly important thing to be doing now. And it just was gratifying to have the chance to work with everyone on the council throughout the two phases. They're really interesting, distinct phases, and it's been enjoyable, honestly, to even see some of our phase one things already out there and happening and so forth. And it'll be equally exciting to see the broad set of things that are being recommended here for phase two to also help our state move in the right direction over the next 10 years. So thank you I'll thank the governor and lieutenant governor for the faith to allow me to be on the council and for the opportunity to share this time with everyone else. So thanks.
Well, just a big ditto on that. Everybody's time and commitment to this in a very fast-moving process has been really, really something. And Jeff, to get to know all of you, most of whom I really didn't know before, I think has been a real joy. And to bring kind of really, truly different perspectives together and kind of move through a process to me was really, really valuable. So I just appreciate everybody's time. And again, especially to the staff who kind of behind the scenes, bravo, really, just bravo. To have that kind of staff commitment was really, really remarkable. So, all right, thank you. We are adjourned.
Great. Thank you, everyone.